made our trek through what is the Bible, through the Pentateuch, the Torah, the first five books of the Old Testament, and we have looked at some of the historiographical works: Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Samuel, and Kings. And now we come to the prophets. The prophets, they do not hold back. If you thought the Bible was PG, just read the prophets, and you'll see that they are very blunt and honest about what is taking place around them. Let's go ahead and just do a brief overview here of the biblical prophets. So, while there were more than 15 prophets in Israel's history, there are 15 prophetical books, not including Daniel, and these books cover about 300 years of time. So I've split this up. You can see we have on the left side the major prophets. Now, these prophets are considered major, not because they're more important, but because literally their books are longer. So Isaiah in English, 66 chapters, I believe. Jeremiah 52, and Ezekiel, I believe, is 47 or 48. They're very long works. While the minor prophets, or the book of the 12, because there's 12 of them, these are minor prophets, not again because they're less important, but because their books are just significantly shorter. And you can see here as well, the vast majority of these prophets are pre-exilic. That is, they're prophesying before the time of the exile, 586 BC or roughly. But some of them, like Ezekiel, and then the three on the right, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, these prophets are prophesying after, either while the people are in exile or when they have returned from exile. So again, there's more than 15 prophets in history of Israel. You can even argue the two most important are Elijah and Elisha, but again, not all of them have books, but these ones do. And so let's go ahead and talk then about just kind of what a prophet is and what they did here. So first, the function of a prophet is twofold. Bare minimum. They do other things too, but at bare minimum. One, they foretell futures events, so predictive prophecy. So they're looking out and saying, this is what's going to happen to you. Or, hey, there's not going to be rain for this amount of time. Or, this king is going to come and destroy you, right? That's predictive prophecy. But then the other thing they do, which is probably the biggest thing they do actually, is they explain, they interpret events through the paradigm of the Torah and covenants. So in this way, the prophets, yes, they predict the future, but they're actually like interpreters. And here's an example of both of those with one prophet, for example. So you have Isaiah, the prophet, 66 chapters, the first major prophet. And Isaiah, in Isaiah chapter 1, verses 16 and 17, he's going to look at what's taking place around him through the paradigm of the Torah, the first five books, and the people's covenant with the Lord. And he's going to be able to look at them and say, hey, you're living in sin. You're doing stupid things. You need to return to your God. And the reason he's able to tell the people that is because he's looking at their life and comparing it with how God told them to live in the Torah and in the covenants. Against the Torah is the first five books of Moses. But within Isaiah as well, you're also going to have Isaiah 45, which is the foretelling of Cyrus, the king of Persia, who's going to send the exiled southern kingdom back to Judah. And that's in Isaiah 45. So you see both of these. You have Isaiah looking at the people, and he's telling them, you are sinful and you are wrong. And at the same time, he's going to, through God's provision, be able to look and say, hey, there's going to be a king from Persia who's ultimately going to send the people back into the land. So not only does he interpret modern events and situations through the Bible, through the Old Testament, the first five books, the Torah, but he also, by God's grace, is able to foretell future events. And that leads us to sort of, this isn't as much a function, but I find the breadth of the prophets fascinating. So as we'll go through these prophets, you'll see no nation is off limit from them. So Isaiah attacks, that's sort of a dramatic term, but he prophesies against the southern kingdom, but he also prophesies against other nations as well. They're called the oracles against the nations. chapters 13 through 23. Jeremiah does the same thing. Ezekiel does the same thing. You have Jonah who goes to Nineveh, goes to Assyria, and you have different prophets who they prophesy against other nations that they're not even from. No nation is off limit from these prophets. And that's because the whole world belongs to Yahweh. There's nothing that's outside of his reach. And I find this just fascinating, absolutely fascinating that the prophets, through God's provision, they don't hold punches. They not only call out iniquity in their own nation, but also in the iniquity of others. And lastly, the prophets here, and this is also just fascinating, they use literal as well as metaphorical language to communicate their messages. So, a great example of this is Hosea. He's the first of the 12 minor prophets. And you see, like Hosea 1, for example, that Hosea, the Lord commands Hosea to marry a prostitute. And this is supposed to symbolize the Lord's willingness to remain in covenant with promiscuous Israel. So, not only do you have maybe the Lord saying, hey, Israel, I love you, but he actually commands his prophet to basically act out and to symbolize, in a metaphor, his own love for the nation. And you'll have other pictures like this as well. Ezekiel crawling through a wall or eating bread over dung or whatever. Like the prophets, they come to symbolize in their own lives, in a sense, the people of Israel. It's quite extraordinary. And so let's go ahead and get started now and move to the first prophet, the book of Isaiah, which is awesome. Let's go ahead and move there now.